Karthik and Ashwin,
Yeah.
can you just share the fact that it's going Facebook Live with the Facebook Live link on Twitter, social media?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, we should be live in about a minute and then we can start.
Hello.
Hello, yes, Anna.
Oh, I think my dad is here and his mic is on, like it's active. So could you mute him?
Yeah,
So we can say hello to your dad now.
yeah.
He's a proud dad today.
Should we start? It's 5.
Yeah, Joam.
Sana and Vinay, you're ready, right?
Yeah, so I'm trying to share my screen.
Having
Yeah.
some trouble?
Yeah, I can't see the option of my desktop.
You want me to do it for you? You can send
I
it.
can do it for you.
Yeah, it's already.
I have it.
Yeah, but let me just check once more.
Okay.
I have it now.
Okay.
Okay, we can see it.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can make it full screen.
Yeah.
Karthik, can you also share the poster of the?
Yeah.
Oh, this is also fine. We can start, Bhargav.
Okay. So good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our second session on this new series of webinars we have just started called the Interdisciplinary Action Research Conversations with Emerging Leaders. So why these conversations? Yes, because in a world where we are all getting used to this new way of life with masks, social distancing, and dealing with sad and not so sad but depressing news all over. There's a lot of research happening amongst us, and our entire situation demands a fresh rethinking. And as our economies have crashed and everybody is coping with the various changes that are happening around us, we thought it would be good to engage with young emerging leaders who've been very quietly and very passionately doing certain kinds of research all around us. And it was this time we thought we should talk to them, understand a little bit more about their work, find out what are the challenges they are facing, and see where their research is going and what is it that they are imagining for the future, and also what outcomes they are expecting, and how will that help the local communities they are working with. So in this context, Center for Financial Accountability and Environment Support Group joined hands to bring together a very diverse set of researchers into these webinars. And so today is our second session. The first session was by Gaurav Vivedi, who spoke about his research on smart cities, which he covered last week. And today's topic, as you all know, is about cityscape transformation and crisis of conservation, especially with our water bodies, the lakes, and tanks, as we refer to in southern India. And today's talk is going to kind of cover a comparison of the Kolkata wetlands and the Bangalore's lake systems. There's a lot that has happened in the context of the lakes of Bangalore as well. And so with the other water bodies across India, everywhere urbanization is taking over, dumping of waste, dumping of sewage, encroachment of lake beds. Livelihoods have been wiped away, especially fishermen, dhobies, and others who use the lake beds during the summer months and winter months. So a lot of effort is ongoing, and a lot of legal interventions have been used by groups across the country to kind of draw attention to these commons and how these commons have to be preserved and protected for water security for the future. So in this context, we have two young researchers today, Sana Haq and Vinay Kumar. It gives me great pleasure to introduce both of them. So to introduce Dr. Sana Haq, Dr. Sana Haq has a master's degree in geography from Delhi School of Economics and PhD in sociology from Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay. And her PhD thesis deals with the loss of wetlands as well as conservation from a sociological perspective, and with a special focus on the East Kolkata wetlands. And Sana has been associated with ESG for nearly 2 years now, and she works as a senior research associate. Thank you, Sana, for agreeing to be part of this conversation. We look forward to what you have to say. And then we have Vinay Kumar. Vinay Kumar is an intellectual property consultant specializing in the area of medical devices. He has been involved in civic activism with various citizen groups in Bangalore. His areas of interest are local self-governance, environment, and heritage conservation. In today's conversation, we learn about what brought Vinay into the world of lakes and wetlands, and what is it that he's doing, and what he learned in his journey, and what is happening especially in Bangalore. So thanks everybody again for joining. Just a few housekeeping rules. Please keep your cell phones on silent and your mics on mute. If you have any questions, suggestions, comments, please type it in the chat box. It's easy for us to moderate. And if we do have time, if you have raised your hand, we'll give you an opportunity to talk. Our speakers will speak for the first 40 minutes, and then we will take question answers. And as you probably saw in the chat box, it is also going live on Facebook. And we also have tweets being tweeted from the ESG India handle. So please do follow us on that. So before we start, we will have two formal presentations, and then we'll get into a conversation with both of them. So first we will have Sana make her presentation. Over to you, Sana.
Okay, thank you, Bhargavi. Hello, everyone, and good evening. So today I will be talking about the conservation crisis that is emerging in our cities with respect to commons, and I will be making a comparative demonstration by using the cases of East Kolkata wetlands and the Bangalore lake system. I don't know why the slide is not changing. Okay. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with the word commons, but I'll still give a very basic description of what commons means. So commons are defined as natural resources which are owned and managed by a community instead of private individuals. So in that sense, forests, fisheries, pastures, meadows, watering systems, groundwater, oceans, atmosphere, and of course lakes are all commons. But despite these natural resources being commonly owned and managed, they're often subjected to various kinds of abuses in the form of encroachments, then illegal grabbings, conversions, which completely change the original characteristics of these resources. So they get built over by roads, bus stands, stadiums, buildings, and so on. So this has been happening in case of East Kolkata wetlands and also the lakes in Bangalore. So first I'll begin with an introduction of East Kolkata wetlands and what the wetlands are. So the East Kolkata wetlands are the eastern peri-urban area of Kolkata, and they are the remnants of this vast expanse of marshlands on which Kolkata was conceived by Job Charnock in 1690. Now they are known as kidneys of Kolkata. Now also they are not as extensive as they used to be. They're now about 12,500 hectares. And it's one of the Ramsar sites of West Bengal. The other one is Sundarbans, which is known to everyone as the home to the Royal Bengal tigers. The Sundarbans became a Ramsar site only last year. However, the East Kolkata wetlands have had this recognition since 1992 and have also been recognized recently as one among the two of world's most precious natural resources for wastewater treatment and a desired model for optimum reuse of water to combat global water crisis. And this recognition was bestowed by the Secretary General of Ramsar Convention, Martha Rojas Orrego. So these wetlands have assumed the role of an important urban infrastructure, but they rely on natural processes that use sunlight, algae, bacteria, and convert the sewage water into this nutrient-rich water, which can sustain fish farming. Because of the nutrient richness, this same sewage water is also used to farm lands that grow two varieties of paddy and a large variety of vegetables. So even a few years back, if it was very common to find people, especially women, who would be selling vegetables along the Eastern Metropolitan Bypass, which is somewhat like a ring road of Bangalore. So if you would drive down the EM bypass bordering the East Kolkata wetlands, you would see like women selling these vegetables that they had taken from the fields of East Kolkata wetlands. So the wetlands produce 40% of Kolkata's daily vegetables and about 10 to 15,000 tons of fish annually, which is consumed by Kolkata. The wetlands are also a receptacle of solid waste. Those of us who are from Kolkata will know the name Dhapa very well. It is about 60 acres or 35 hectares of garbage dumping ground, which is on the verge of closure as the garbage mounds are now about or over 35 meters high, which is equivalent to a 10 or 11-story building. Now, because of Dhapa, the whole wetland...
Anna, just a second. Are you moving your presentation? Because we are all...
Yeah. So I'll move on to the next slide.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry. Yeah.
So now, because of Dhapa, the whole wetland area has earned a bad name amongst the middle class and upper middle class residents of the city. So just because there's a garbage dump, the well-to-do people of the city think that this area is mostly occupied by illegal migrants who, according to them, are invariably Bangladeshis and people who are involved with criminal activities or the very poor of the city. So according to them, to remedy the situation and to get rid of the area of such kind of people, they thought it's a good idea to bring the idea of world-class city into this area. And this has been the result of it. So if you go along EM bypass, you'll
No, I'm
see.
sorry to intervene, but we do not see the slides moving. If you have
Yeah,
moved several slides, you'll see nothing.
I've changed.
No, we don't see it.
It
So-
hasn't moved.
I'm on the next slide.
I don't know why, but you're
Could you
using a
please
PDF
stop the
perhaps?
stream
Yes,
and
yes,
try
I'm
it.
using a PDF.
Start it again.
Okay, but I don't know. It's probably, we're just seeing the introduction slides, that's all.
Oh, I've already moved on to the 5th or 6th slide.
We have not
No,
seen
no,
any of the
that's what
other.
we haven't seen.
Okay. So I'll ask Karthik maybe to share.
Or you can just just stop it and
Yeah.
re-screen share it and start it again. Let's see if it works.
What do
Yeah.
you see?
It's working, yes.
Now it is
Yeah.
Did
working.
you
Now it-
change the slide? Yeah, it works. Go on.
Okay.
Go from your first slide. Yeah.
Yeah,
Go from.
so this is the slide where I gave the description about commons. This is my study area, the East Kolkata wetlands. So on your left side, you'll see the map of Kolkata, and then adjoining to it is the East Kolkata wetland complex. And the two pictures are from there. These are pictures that I've taken during my fieldwork. And then this slide explains what the wetlands do. So I just spoke about farming and fishing activities being practiced there, and then like garbage dumping and the sewage water getting diverted into the wetlands. So this slide is about that. And then this is an ad. So I was talking about how this idea of world-class city was brought into the East Kolkata wetlands. Can you see?
Yeah.
So, so you'll see these kind of ads. There'll be innumerable such ads along the EM bypass, and they'll all have these very fancy sounding names. They will be like boasting about high-end facilities like gyms, clubhouses, swimming pools, and so on. And then they will claim, they also claim that they provide the best of living standards, while also being surrounded by these sprawling water bodies and green fields. This is a picture I took of this 45-story luxury residential apartment complex called Urbana, which stands on land which was once wetlands, and it is on the western edge of the East Kolkata wetlands. So another reason why there has been excessive urbanization in the eastern and the southeastern periphery of the wetlands is that the state government thinks that it has started to increasingly rely on the real estate sector to bring in economic gains for the state. We know that Kolkata was once called a dying city by Rajiv Gandhi, and all the industries fled from the state because they could not handle the trade unions there. So this slide shows how much and how rapidly the wetlands are losing their original characteristics. The satellite images are from Bhagwanpur Moja. So Mojas are basically villages. So there are about 32 villages that make up the East Kolkata wetland complex. So Bhagwanpur is one of those Mojas, and in 2002, 88% of Bhagwanpur was water bodies. In 2006, that number has come down to 19%. And if we do a survey right now, then I'm sure the number would have come down even further. So these pictures are of some encroachments and conversions that I took while I was doing my fieldwork. The picture with the blue poster says that the land is for sale, and the local club, which is generally patronized by the political party which is in power, and clubs are basically spaces where the young men go for recreation. So they'll have carom boards and TT tables. So this poster says that the land is for sale, and the local club should be contacted to find out about the sale details. Then the picture below is of a partially converted water body. If you look closer, then you'll see on the left hand side, you can still see some water. Then the one that the picture that is beside the second picture, that is of an engineering college. Such illegal buildings claiming to be colleges or schools have now come up all over the wetlands, especially along the western and the southwestern parts of the East Kolkata wetlands. The last picture with the mound of earth is of a water body that is that is in waiting to get encroached. That earth will be used to cover up the water body, and once it looks like dry land, it will be made available for sale. So I wanted to show some historical maps of East Kolkata wetlands and Bangalore. So the conjectural map of Kolkata shows Kolikata, Shutanuti and Gobindapur, which basically form the nucleus from where Kolkata city emerged. And if you look closely, on the eastern side of these three settlements, you'll see a vast expanse called the saltwater lakes. The 1828 painting shows how small and medium-sized boats plied in the area. I've also included a map of Bangalore from 1800s. The map can be seen having a number of water bodies scattered within and outside of the bound hedge that once demarcated the boundary of the city. The hand-drawn maps in the middle with the white background, they are of Sampangi Lake. In 1885, the surroundings were mostly cultivated areas and Cubbon Park, like in yellow and green. Cubbon Park is shown in green and the open space is in yellow. In 2014, all the cultivated land had become built up area, and the lake is now an indoor stadium called Kantirava Stadium. So when I came to Bangalore, I saw the same story continuing, which I had seen in Kolkata. So I'll begin the Bangalore part of my presentation by showing some slides on the current situation of a few lakes in Bangalore. These pictures that you see right now, they are from Subramanyapura Kere. The lake was once so pristine that it attracted migratory birds from all over the country and the world. And it was also an important source of drinking water for the locality. Now the surrounding of the lake is severely encroached. There are illegal structures that have come up inside the lake bed and on top of the Rajakalve or the canal that feeds this lake. All the untreated sewage are now diverted to the lake from the many apartment complexes that surround the lake. It is apparently being reclaimed or rehabilitated, but it is being done in the most unscientific manner. This rehabilitation plan has been promoting soup bowl designs and an island inside this lake. Which is eating up the lake bed area, in addition to all the lake bed that has been lost to encroachments. This is an illustration showing the status of Begur Lake. It is an ancient lake, about 1,000 years old or more than that. The rehabilitation efforts again are being done using unscientific ideas. The Google Earth images show how the lake has shrunk between 2000 and 2015. We have Vinay with us today. He will be able to speak more about Begur, its history, and what's currently happening to this lake. This is another illustration showing the status of Jarganahalli and Yalachanahalli lakes. These lakes and their canals have become spots for dumping construction debris, garbage, industrial waste, and abattoir waste. In an ongoing case in Karnataka High Court, BBMP itself submitted a list of disused lakes. We went from ESG, we went and surveyed all 19 lakes that was listed by BBMP and found that they have been converted into bus depots, roads, layouts, playgrounds, stadiums, garages, choultries, one encroachment was being done by one of the major malls of South Bangalore. And then there were even office buildings that belong to the state government itself. However, in Bangalore, there are groups like ESG, which has been involved in protecting and rehabilitating, involved in efforts that of protecting and rehabilitating lakes. This is something which I felt is starkly absent in the case of Kolkata. In this regard, I will be speaking about two cases, writ petition number 817 of 2008 and writ petition number 38401 of 2014. I will begin with 817, which was basically a PIL filed by ESG seeking to end the policy of privatization of lakes and for advancing a participatory scheme to protect and rehabilitate lakes and canals. It was not just for Bangalore, it was for the whole of the state of Karnataka. And there were several outcomes from the case. Firstly, the High Court prohibited the dumping of garbage and sewage in lakes. Then district lake protection committees and an apex committee at the state level with quasi-judicial powers were set up. Also, the recommendations of Justice N.K. Patil's committee were accepted by the court, which had produced two reports. The first report contained comprehensive guidelines about lake protection and rehabilitation, and the second one was on why lake privatization is a bad idea. This PIL is also the reason why the state government formulated a law to protect lakes across Karnataka. It is called the Karnataka Tank Conservation and Development Authority Act. However, one aspect of the PIL, which was seeking to get lease agreements with 3 private companies quashed by the High Court, it did not materialize. So ESG had to approach the Supreme Court with a special leave petition challenging this part of Karnataka High Court order. In 2019, ESG and Leo, who is our coordinator, he and ESG pleaded in a PIL between Citizens Action Group and the state of Karnataka. This case is still being heard by the principal bench of Karnataka. And in the course of hearing, several directions have been passed by Chief Justice Oka. One of them being that the state has to abide by the earlier High Court directions passed in case of 817. The High Court also asserted the importance of public trust doctrine to protect lakes as commons, and asked the state government to appoint NEERI to produce a report on the status of lakes. And also on the request of ESG, the state directed to facilitate the Birdwatchers Field Club of Bangalore for conducting a survey demonstrating the biodiversity richness of these lakes. This order was passed on the 27th of November last year. However, until mid-January, the state had not complied with the court's order. And in the midst of all this, the issue of privatization again reared its head. On 29 December of 2019, full-page ads showed up in leading newspapers, which said the state government was launching a tank development and beautification scheme under corporate social responsibility. This ad was brought to the attention of the court by ESG, to which the court said it directed the state government to explain if this scheme complied with Justice N.K. Patil's report on privatization of lakes. Then due to the pandemic, that the court has been unable to hear the case further, but we know from the number of people who approach ESG that the problem of violating lakes continue. So at ESG, we have put up everything we have done with respect to protecting lakes on our website. So all our PILs, all related documents can be found there. We also created a post on our website, which is called Saving Lakes Using Judicial Orders Issued in ESG's PILs. We have used the example of one lake called Krishnarajapura Kere and have listed out stepwise how we went about from the beginning and to what is currently happening with respect to this lake. So we keep updating the post as and when new developments happen. So if any of you are interested to find out, please visit esgindia.org. So I'll end my presentation here. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanam, for that wonderful presentation, which kind of gave us a comparison of the Kolkata wetlands and an understanding of what's happening in Bangalore, despite the court order of 2012. And since then, the many steps that have been taken by NGOs and the push by the government to continue with stories of privatization. So in that context, I think we will now listen to Vinay. He also has a presentation. Like Sana said, he'll first of all tell us about what brought him into this whole lake story through his presentation. So I will hand it over to him. Yeah, Vinay.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Bhargavi and Leo for inviting me. I really miss being having an interaction in person with people, because ideally I would have started asking people about what they're already doing, or how at the end of this session that we could probably end up recruiting more people to join us. I wouldn't want to let go of people. Otherwise, given this kind of a setup, it becomes easy to just listen and sit in the comforts of our homes. Hopefully, we can nudge a few more people to join us.
Yeah, we're going to test your storytelling skills, how well you tell your story now.
Right. Okay. So, yeah, the story is quite an interesting one. It's truly interdisciplinary. When I look at it's so relevant. I mean, almost every word there is relevant to what's happening. And it talks about the interdisciplinary nature of the research. So my story is one of my interest in heritage conservation that led towards lake conservation. So this is one of the earliest records that I could find. Talks about the water bodies in Bangalore. Very often we see in newspapers what kind of numbers that are thrown about. Bangalore is a garden city, the city of lakes, and whatnot. Look at this document I managed to find from a book called The Moral and Material Progress of Mysore State. It just shows a lot about what people were documenting. Progress. I don't know if we can still use the word material progress with regard to Bangalore today. If the same authority were to do this exercise again, would they call it progress or what? I am doubtful. But here, this map shows that there were about 2,300 water bodies in this area. Of course, the boundaries of Bangalore, what is called Bangalore district here might vary from current day definition, but still it's a good estimate from the late 1800s. This is from 1892 to 1890. So it also shows, I'm not sure if the colors are clearly visible. So I'll just read out. The legend says the bodies marked yellow are tanks that were restored and repaired from 1882 to 1892, and the ones in red were in progress. So it shows us that what people did care for these water bodies. Perhaps some of them were already existing, some of them were built around that time. I'll go through what could have been, what really existed and where our water bodies came from. So from about 2,300 water bodies, the official estimates today say it could be somewhere less than 200. So that is the drastic change in, right? So not even a couple of hundred years. So it's like just about degradation that has happened. Yeah, so today it's fairly easy to understand this degradation using satellite data. One such figure you can notice the change in the surface area of the water bodies here. This is from the 70s to 2012, and these water bodies are the interconnected nature of these water bodies were all pretty well known, and you can make out from it's so easy to understand these using the Google Maps or Google Earth and the other wealth of topographic data that is available today. How are these connected? How or why do these lake seem to connect to each other? This is a beautiful topographic rendering, 3D rendering, which gives us an idea of how naturally Bangalore is lends itself well to this kind of an interconnected system of lakes. The natural topography is such that when one of the lakes overflows, it just flows down into another lake, and which was and this kind of a system has developed over many centuries, and people have known of all this, and over time it has only degraded, and all the flooding that we're seeing today is largely due to the lack of care or even understanding of these lake systems and how they're actually interconnected. So I would have loved to ask people if they can recall what this place is in. One of this is what was called Dharmambudhi Kere. This is an image from the 50s, right? And in the 60s, we managed to find a satellite image from the United States Geological Service, right? And today this is what is called Majestic or Subhash Nagar bus stand, right? So this is the so-called progress and development that we have made. And like how Sana gave an example of the Sampangi tank, this is another example of what we have done to one of our tanks in the city, right? Here's another rendering of, just to give an example of what is the recent degradation. This is from a period of 2014 to 2017. So all the red spots on the map shows loss of tree cover, loss of vegetation, or even loss of hyacinth cover over the lake. So the change of land use is drastic. That's what I just wanted to indicate in this particular place. You can notice that most of central district in Bangalore is already considered development, and the scope for such a change is not so much as the periphery where you change in land use. And then that brings me to what looks like a graveyard here, but I'd like to draw people's attention to one particular slab I'll probably annotate here this part. I don't know if it's visible. So that is an inscription stone. This was part of a, survey and a project that I had taken up to explore and find out about these inscription stones that are lying all over the city. And one such inscription I happened to find in a graveyard here. And what is interesting about this inscription stone is that it talks about a lake, right? So this particular inscription is from the 11th century, and it is interestingly in Tamil. And it says that Rajaraja Chola, who ruled at that time, built a lake in Patandur and set aside a grant to maintain the sluice gates of the lake. Right? And he built that lake for the people of Patandur. And the area is still called Patandur today. And what happened next is also interesting. So this lake, as you see, is partially converted into a graveyard now. This very likely could have been the wetland near that lake. And also the other part of the lake has been encroached, and there were some private constructions that were coming up. And what happened next was people protested. There was a PIL filed, and this inscription was submitted as evidence of this lake having been in existence since the 11th century, and it was admitted by the court. And there was a stay order, and I think this case is still ongoing. So it's fascinating how, for an inscriptional evidence helped in confirming the presence of the lake. Of course, there were other land use documents that were produced, but it was just we were able to establish the antiquity of this land use, which goes back centuries, and hopefully this will help us reclaim the lake. And similarly, when you look at the history of Bangalore, the Bangalore region, right? These are the kind of names you'll find on stone inscriptions. And invariably, these all are linked to some kind of a settlement. And the settlement would have most likely been around a water body, which would have been a lake, a tank, or a river, very often a tank or a lake. So when I started documenting all these stones, you've found out that there are many of them which talk about lakes having been built by people who lived in this area, right? And that's how you see all those 2,000 odd lakes, which have many of which have been preserved over many centuries, and in fact thousands of years. So that brings us to the Begur Lake. Begur is also Begur is very close to current day Electronic City, which is considered one of the most high-tech regions of Bangalore, where people take pride of all the technology that's developed there.
Vinay,
And what is fascinating about Begur is that is where we get the city Bangalore gets its name from. So in Begur, yeah.
sorry,
Am I audible?
But there is a problem with the lag. A lot of people are reporting there's a lag with your internet. We checked if anyone else was. Several are. Is there somebody can? Is there? You can.
Is it better now?
No, it's just that your internet is unstable, I think. So there is a lag.
Okay, I just checked. It's fine. Maybe I'll just switch off my video.
No, but when you're sharing screen, your video is on, in effect. Go ahead. We can hear you.
Go ahead.
Okay. Sorry about that. I'll just. Yeah. Is this visible now?
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Okay. So. Yeah, so Begur is just located in the is close to Electronic City region of Bangalore, and our city gets its name from this inscription, which is dated to be around 890 AD. So that's I was loitering around this area scouting for inscriptions sometime back, and this is what happened. One of the days, I happened to stumble upon a stone tablet. This was again, dated to be somewhere around the 11th century, and if you notice here. This tablet was found inside the lake. It was a Mahishamaardhini figure. And in the background, you can see the Begur temple which houses the inscription that talks about the earliest mention of the name Bangalore. Right? And after this, I just reported this to the archaeology department, and sorry, it seems to be I'm unable to switch. Sorry, yeah. So this was reported to the archaeology department with the hope that the lake will be declared as a heritage lake because of this artifact, and maybe it will help us find a good place for this particular tablet, and perhaps further exploration could lead to possibly finding a temple or some kind of a structure which this stone could have been a part of. For many months, nothing happened. Despite all written representations and requests, nothing happened. And also what was found is just very close to the same stone, I happened to find this tablet here, which is called a Govinakallu. These are traditional boundary markers found around lakes and wetland areas. It clearly indicates even the iconography was helped using when this was shown to a few archaeologists. They said that this could be dated to perhaps somewhere between the 11th to 13th century that such icons were used. The land use in that region, so it clearly shows that what could have been some sort of a grazing land around the lake. Right? So all this was submitted to the archaeology department, but nothing happened. We also came to know that there was a plan to convert Begur Lake into a tourist destination with a towering Shiva statue as a plan to revive the historic hamlet. So it was around this time that I happened to work. I had developed some good contacts in the local area where people would call us to talk about any new archaeological findings, because this settlement, Begur, is one of the oldest settlements in and around Bangalore. So it dates back to the 8th century, where we have the earliest record of any kind of modern human settlement. So there are high chances that you would stumble upon some or the other artifact in this region. And when I went back, I found that this lake bed has been there's a frenzy of activity on the lake bed. The lake had been dry for over the previous monsoon as well. This was just around just at the beginning of the summer. So over one summer and a monsoon, this lake had been drained out and let dry. And I was shocked to know of the development plans. And it was around this time that, I reached out to Leo, and we said, okay, this has to be stopped. This is what the plan was, to build 3 concrete islands inside the lake. One would have a Shiva statue, and this hold the jogging track. We're all in gross violation of the established guidelines guidelines of lake conservation. Of course, I was just an ordinary citizen who had some concern for lakes, but never really bothered to read into all of these documents. It wasn't until I reached out to Leo, and he kind of guided me to say, okay, these are the things that are already established. Please go through and find out what are the kind of violations. So we collected all these kind of evidences, and during the process, I had other friends join in and pitch in. People like Alim who joined me and said, okay, let's go on do a survey. And then we started filing RTIs to collect documents and understand what was the development plans. And there was also some really we did experience great difficulty in getting this information, because people suspicious is why do you want this, but of course, but my intent was just to find out how this could aid in the archaeological preservation of this kind of region. But slowly it turned out that it is more than just being an archaeological preservation. It's also an ecological preservation exercise that is required, going by the kind of destruction that was happening there. And then so then we joined in with Leo and tagged along to his existing PIL, and this kind of a representation was prepared. Today, I think it's so easy to showcase all this. Much of this can be done from the comforts of our homes. Of course, some of these photos are from the ground, but then you look at all the satellite imagery that's available right now. Each of us can do this at home and try and understand what's happening to our city, and prepare something like this. And and the court actually was impressed by this kind of template that was developed by Leo and team, and not just the court. I think it just gives. I wish every lake in the country has some kind of a document like this that could help people understand what's happening to the water bodies around us. Right? And post this was submitted to the court, and despite all our, just before the first hearing in the court, the statue was installed inside a lake. This is a tall Shiva statue, about 40 to 50 feet tall statue, and this is a granite statue, and to bear the weight of such a structure, you can imagine what kind of concrete that was poured into the lake for this, to build this pier. It was also, if you look at the plans, it talks about a boating facility where people could go by boat to this island, and that was the intended plan for this lake. Despite all, although the court issued a stay order on the very first hearing, by then this was installed. And I'd then like to share what kind of documents that aided us in preparing. I'd like to quickly probably even read out one such report, which came about because of ESG's petition earlier. So this is the popular Justice N.K. Patil report, where the judge says, the Honorable Chief Justice and companion judge, while hearing a PIL, this is Leo's PIL, were pleased to constitute a committee consisting of 10 members, headed by a chairman, High Court Legal Services Committee, to suggest the required steps and measures to be taken for preservation and restoration of lakes in and around Bangalore, and to submit its report. In this regard, earlier Lakshman Rao Committee in 1988 had dealt with the very issue of preservation of lakes in clear terms, but the efforts of the government, Forest Department, BBMP, BDA, and Pollution Control Board and LDA could not match the requirement of the day, right? So Bangalore is in course for rapid expansion, transforming itself from a metro to a mega city. During this process, the worst hit are the lakes of the region, which are put to of the region. The estimated population of Bangalore by 2020 would be around 120 lakhs, and it depends a very proactive regulation, planning, and execution of systems in place. So I'll just skim through and says that the committee has met frequently, deliberated on various facets of lake conservation and the actions required to mitigate the same. So the committee further sought views of experts, experienced people in lake conservation, and finalized the report. At the end of it all, they also say, since guise of expansion, thoughtful advanced planning is required in these peripheral areas of the city, which are fortunately not much spoiled. Right? So they conclude that a stitch in time saves nine, and these timely measures will help in the non-recurrence of problems that we face in core Bangalore today. So this was 2011, right? And despite having such a good guidelines to help us preserve our water bodies, and also an admission from the authorities that there is severe degradation and that it needs immediate attention. So look at what has happened. Where are we today? Right? This is from earlier this year. It says that report says 87% of lakes restored by BBMP in poor state. 53% are very bad. This is 10 years after having a court order along with the guidelines as how to preserve the water bodies, right? And this is very recently during this pandemic. There's a wall collapse, and the mayor says it was unscientific work. This is just the usual. We are back to the usual lame game. That is where we are 10 years online. Right? Why are we here? Why are we like this? The problems are they're multi-layered, and I'd like to point out to simple things like say, look at this report from 2006. This is a project plan for developing Hebbal Lake. And here, if you look, the consultant is BMOS Technocrats. So for almost 10 years, it's the same people. It's the modus operandi is very clear. It's the same set of people who are involved. If you notice, even in the Begur Lake plan, the same company is part of doing all of this. So, I mean, you can easily connect the dots when you go a little beyond the surface. And it's nothing, I don't think it is rocket science, and it's just a matter of our concern for our environment and our city. And with just a little concern and converting that into something more tangible, like even online research, and helping people like ESG would go a long way. And I'd like to conclude by pointing out to 3 links. I think Karthik or Ashwin could share those.
I think we have lost Vinay. Okay, he's back.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we can hear you, Vinay.
Sorry, I don't know where I got cut. Really sorry. I think it's my internet.
Yeah, I think your internet is really bad. So maybe you could quickly conclude and we could take some questions.
Did I get cut in on this slide?
No, you just went off for a few moments. That's all.
Right, yeah. So I'd just like to point out to these 3 links, I think, which will be shared. Right, okay, yeah. So the first one Sana already spoke about, and the second one is, again, which has a longish, much more detailed description of the efforts taken by ESG. And also the last one is the reports, all the official records and the guidelines, which would help. This is particularly related to Karnataka, but I think it would help anyone in anywhere in the country. Yeah, so thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that very detailed presentation of what you went looking for and how it brought you to the story of lakes. That was really very helpful. It will be good if both of you can now briefly share with our participants here. So see, we all live in various neighborhoods across Bangalore and cities across India. So if there is a lake behind my house and it is in a sad state, where do I start? How do I start? What are the first few steps I take? If you can give some guidance on that.
Hi, can I speak first?
Yes, Anna.
Okay, so what we do at ESG is, like, if you visit that post I shared as my last slide about how to save lakes using the outcomes of ESG's PIL. So if we receive a phone call saying some encroachments or something is happening to a lake near the person where he lives or she lives. So first, in case of Krishnarajpura Kere, what we did was we first went for first round of survey. Then we went around the area and we spoke to the local people, basically the people who had brought up the complaint of the lake encroachment. We spoke to them. We found out what they felt was encroaching on the lake bed. And then we came back and we made a detailed report. But we didn't stop there. We went back for 2 more rounds of surveys to verify if the information that we received the first time and the second time were correct. And then according to that, we developed a representation, and we also used the templates that I shared of the illustrations of status of lakes. So we have a set template. We use that to prepare the pictorial representation of the lake's status, and we submit that along with the representation to the principal conservator of forest, the PCCF, and the Lake Karnataka Tank Conservation and Development Authority. And that's how we go about And then as the developments happen, we work according to that.
And when you do that, what is the response of the concerned authorities, be it the Karnataka Tank and Lake Development Authority or the Forest Department? What is the first response?
So the responses are like in case of Krishnarajpura Kere, it has been positive. So they have said that they will look into the complaint and then file a report on the basis of their observations, and then they will ask the PCCF, then the CCF, and then the Karnataka Legal Services, all of them to follow up.
Okay. Vinay, would you like to add? So my question was, if people have leaks in and around their homes, what are the first steps they need to do? How do they go about it? So Sana guided us to this very detailed step-by-step way of going about it. So would you like to also add to this? You have to unmute.
No, yeah, okay, sorry. So yeah, my experience is, sometimes even just a simple RTI can make a huge difference. Just filing an RTI would make the authorities wonder if firstly, then there's something wrong that they're doing. Invariably, you would want to file an RTI only when you sense that there could be something going wrong. I would say even not if for someone who's not done something like this before, maybe just look at just out of curiosity. I mean, just go look up your home on Google Earth. Look at how the land use has changed around your home over many decades. Of late, even ISRO has been releasing a lot of satellite imagery. So one can also look at those images. And I think that's a great place to explore. Just keep exploring Google Earth and you'll find a lot of violations. And then maybe just look at, that should inspire anybody. I mean, you see images like that, but when you see blatant destruction of the environment around you, and all of us are right now facing the consequences, and with the current changes in the laws, and it is only going down south. So I really wish see people would just simply look at sit from the comforts of their homes. And today you can file an RTI online. You don't necessarily have to go to their office. Just ask a question as to what's happening and see the response. I mean, I would say you really need to get your feet wet, and then slowly you'll feel like swimming.
Thank you. Going back to one of the reports that Sana mentioned, you said that in January, the Birdwatchers Field Club did a survey of all the lakes from the angle of bird habitats. Would you like to share some findings of that?
Yeah, so the final report is still not available, but I know some observations that have been shared when the data was being analyzed. So one of the worrying observations was like the decline in the species number in the lakes of Bangalore. So that's something that is really scary. Like, although there are we are told that rehabilitation efforts are going on and islands are getting built where the birds can come and like roost and like it can use as breeding grounds. But yeah, so one observation was there has been a stark, massive decline in species number in Bangalore Lake.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Sana, you also mentioned about the soup bowl structures, and I'm sure Vinay has also seen a lot of that. So I know that in many parts of Bangalore today, many of the lakes that have been this kind of restored, have taken this typical Subol structure with jogging track all around and some random islands in the center. So where do you think that structure, that way of restoring is coming from, and who are the people behind that, and is there any science and logic to it, and where do you see it going in the coming years? Because obviously now one lake is not connected to the other like in the past, and the gradient has been destroyed. So where do you see the ecology and the aquatic ecosystem of this lake in 5-10 years from now, these kind of Subol structures? Both of you.
I think Vinay can answer this because he comes with a technology background, so maybe he'll be able to explain it better.
Yeah, I'm surprised. We look at all these old documents. In fact, one of the last documents that I showed about Hebal Lake, there is a mention of this soup ball there. So the understanding, I mean, our understanding of ecology is so primitive when it comes to developing these lakes, or despite us having so many environmentalists and even the famous Indian Institute of Science here with a well-established ecology department and all the access that we have to the kind of studies that has gone around. When it comes to actually using the science, we take a very easy approach to say that the moment you create an island, you attract birds, and so you need it could sometimes that island could also be a boating destination, so it serves multiple purposes. So let us go ahead and build these islands. That seems to be the explanation that I see in most of these reports. That is a justification that is there in almost all of these reports, including Begur Lake. Right? So this is despite the N.K. Patil report clearly mentioning that no concrete structures can be built in the lake, and even a jogging track is not a preferred way to strengthen the boundary. So here the justification is that jogging track can strengthen the boundary, and then a soup bowl will attract the birds, and so we're going to do that. Yeah, I mean, so Leo has brought this up. It is very pertinent here. So this was the plan that is mentioned in the guidelines, and nobody seems to follow. And we don't really have to dig deep. It's already well established. All of this, experts have spent many years arriving at these conclusions, and these are things that work and have known to work. It's just that people get away scot-free violating these norms, and it is us who need to firstly be aware of these guidelines, at least if not in depth, maybe discuss with the experts who understand why these how these guidelines have developed, and then we need to ask questions. I think we really each of us, perhaps I see 33 participants at this point. I really want, I don't know if 33 questions can arise out of today's at the end of the talk, because we are I might sound desperate, and I might be even sounding alarmist, but that is where we are today. I mean, we really don't have time to sit and watch. Whatever little it may be, even if you can simply find a document that shows that there was a lake here, it could have been some private land record which mentions that this property was next to a lake. That could go a long way in saving a lake. So yeah, I'd only say more and more people need to come in and take up the initiative and support in whatever way possible.
Yeah, I think the booklet that Leo just shared, it was largely the work of Dr. Subramania, who spent a lot of time in, writing that particular report as part of the recommendation to the court, and which gives details to what kind of plants, herbs, shrubs, everything should be planted, what attracts birds, butterflies, bees, etc. Raghavendra Pachapur also raises a very important issue about sewage entering lakes. Sewage entering lakes is like a big thing now, and across Bangalore we have hundreds of apartment complexes. Sana did show us how Subramaniapura Kere is receiving sewage from all these lakes. This is despite the fact that each apartment complex beyond a certain number of apartments should have its own sewage treatment plants. But we continuously see the absence of these sewage treatment plants functioning. Even if they are present, they don't function up to their full capacity. And sometime late in the night, they're releasing untreated sewage into the waters. And the city does not have enough sewage treatment plants. We probably have 20 or 25. Correct me if I'm wrong. So that is a huge problem. And in that context, I'm sure, would you like to explain what constructed wetlands should be? Because I think that is what is advocated both in science and in the more recent code recommendations. Sana, would you like to explain what a constructed wetland is like and how it actually helps in treating sewage?
Yeah, so basically, the idea is to build a constructed wetland at the point where the sewage is entering, like not sewage, I'm sorry. Basically, where the water from the Raja Kalve is entering into the lakes. So what ESG says is it's preferable the constructed wetlands is constructed outside the lake boundary so that it doesn't eat into the lake bed area. So when the water flows through the constructed wetland, it can itself act as a filtering mechanism for the water that is entering into the water body. So that's one idea of why constructed wetlands are important in the lake conservation efforts.
Thank you, Sana. And would you like to explain a little bit? We have a comment from Pradeep who says that there should have been a little more comparison and functional values of the East Kolkata wetlands. I know there was a lot of focus on the Bangalore wetlands today, but would you like to share something more on the Kolkata wetlands? And because
there are like several, like many other functions that the East Kolkata wetlands performs, and it is just not, like Pradeep said, it's just not restricted to producing vegetables and fish. So I mentioned those two because I thought they are like one of the primary functions that East Kolkata wetlands performs, along with filtering the 80% of Kolkata's almost 80% of Kolkata's sewage water. So there are a host of other functions that East Kolkata wetland performs. Like it's like Pradeep said, it's a very important carbon sink. So almost 60% of the sewage water which comes into the wetlands, from there the East Kolkata wetlands, the water that comes into the East Kolkata wetlands. So in that, about 60% of the carbon is trapped and stored in the East Kolkata wetlands. They are also regulators of microclimate, and then they also have functions that transcend the boundary of the city of Kolkata. They serve as important buffer zone to the Sundarbans. So if the East Kolkata wetlands are gone, it means that the Sundarbans will also like go. So they're very important buffer zones. And then surprisingly, these wetlands can also become models to take care of the problem of cleaning a river like Ganga. Like nobody talks about like how wetlands can be used to clean these big rivers. Like we only talk about this amount of money has been sanctioned in the budget by the central government, and it's going to be, apparently it is going into the use of cleaning these big rivers. but Dhrubajyoti Ghosh, who dedicated his life to studying and conserving these East Kolkata wetlands, he showed like how if we take a model of like the East Kolkata wetlands and use it to clean the Ganga at points where we know most amount of pollutants come from, it can go a long way towards addressing the problem of pollution in Ganga. So in addition to these, there are a lot of other functions as well, and economists have done studies to find out the economic valuation of these services, and they go into millions of dollars. So yeah, Pradeep is right. It's not just producing fish and vegetables. There are a lot of other functions that East Kolkata Wetlands performs.
Thank you. I also see Raghavendra Pachapur. Raghavendra, would you like to comment on this technical committees which go on approving the soup bowl model? You've seen that from your own experience. Would you like to say a word about it? Raghavendra? Because Raghavendra is somebody who's been working on some of the lakes in South Bangalore with the support of CSR. And they've done quite a bit of work in raising awareness in local communities on exactly the same things that we've been learning. Yeah. You can speak now.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, in spite of all those huge struggles by ESG, and in spite of recommendations coming, still our BBMP engineers who come from civil background, they continue with the same perspective of making tanks, more and more tanks, and it comes from nowadays KTDCA is the department which gives the approval for all these DPRs, and it becomes very difficult for any group or resident group or NGOs to intervene, and the BBMP will always tell it's a DPR approved by technical committee at KTDCA, and they just skip I mean their responsibilities. So we are with particularly with Dotkal Sandra case, the residents have come together. They have asked put in their suggestions for the DPR, but now at this stage we are now going to KTDCA, and we need to further see what can be done at KTDCA.
Thank you. There's one more comment from Mr. Paul. So he says, aren't wetlands also the largest natural source of methane emissions? So does it balance out the carbon capture property and become a net GHG sink, considering the higher global warming potential of methane? Any of you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I don't know too much of technicalities of the methane emission happening from wetlands, but yes, it is a concern, and people who are associated with conservation work in the East Kolkata wetlands, they also feel that more needs to be done to control carbon emission from happening from East Kolkata wetlands.
Okay, thank you. So I think we have another 7 minutes, and it'll be great to hear from both of you about if younger generations want to engage in protecting these water bodies. I know there are ways in which Sana described, but there is one particular story that Vinay shared with me. It'll be great to hear from him again. So if you can share it with our participants. Given that is also in the context of our education systems today, and how we have what Raghavendra just mentioned, most of our civil engineers at BBMP and others, for them protection means pouring cement. And so this story will tell you like where that knowledge comes from and how difficult, what a challenge we have to help people unlearn those things. Yeah, Vinay.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is a great chance also now that we are rapidly adapting to different modes of communication. Like this Zoom call, I don't think had it been sometime last year, this would not have been our first choice of communication, right? So we are adapting, we're learning to adapt, and similarly the way with education as well, right? Everybody's moving to newer things, and I think there is a realization of the futility of the archaic structures that we've had of imparting education. And my experience is having dealt with a bunch of students, especially engineering. This was at an engineering college, where the idea was to get students to work on city level projects. And of course, it looks very daunting when you talk of solving the problems for the city. It's not going to happen overnight. But why can't students attempt to solve was my exploration. So I developed this plan of getting, civic issues, breaking them into small chunks that many student groups can start working on. Now I'm talking in the context of a engineering college. So one of the things that I proposed was, at that point I was working on heritage conservation, where it involved a lot of heavy use of technology, like wherein computer science students could help with developing algorithms to understand scripts, ancient scripts, or mechanical engineers could come in and use their laser scanners, and architecture students could help in survey, civil engineers could help in surveying the expanse of these places. So, but unfortunately, the institute itself could not understand that how would engineers help in heritage conservation, right? That interdisciplinary nature of the project was not immediately understood by people. Similarly, when you look at lake conservation today, imagine the kind of technology that we have at our hands. I can suggest a small exercise where you say, just try and map how many apartments in Bangalore are close to a lake. Just look up a few apartments on Google Map, say apartments above 200 homes, and how close are they to the lake. I think there is so much that will emerge, so much detail that will emerge as to why these apartments ended up being close to a lake, what is their affinity for lakes. And you don't need to be an environmentalist or ecologist to do it. Anyone can do this. So that is what I feel educational institutes, if they can help students choose these kind of projects where they are not just leave lake conservation to an ecology department. Instead, get the computer science guy to build algorithms that will search for all the lakes in Bangalore. I'm just trying to be very specific and give examples, because very often when I talk of these concepts and how connected they are, it doesn't seem to get through to many people. I mean, unless they've already tried something like this. So so in the end, that project of getting engineering students to work on city level projects as part of their final year project, and then wherein all of us can in the end pool in all the projects together and attempt to solve this problem. Not even aim to solve it, I mean aim to completely arrive at a solution, but at least generate good enough data through RTIs, and it would feed into the works and efforts of organizations like ESG. So, but it just didn't happen because people didn't feel the need for it. But now with the opportunities that are emerging because of this pandemic, and people are willing to rethink education, there is a need to push for interdisciplinary research, and get even engineers can think about lakes, computer science engineers, or mechanical engineers or civil engineers can do ecology. And perhaps people like ESG and all of us working in this field can build some kind of communication material to make these connections apparent.
Thank you, Vinay. And a last question to Sana. So Yogita says, could you please share any work done by economists to estimate value of water bodies? Are there any such studies, Sana?
There are works going on in Calcutta University. Then the department where I studied in IIT Bombay, some work has been done there as well. So I could share the links to the works if Yogita gives me her contact details.
Okay. So we are on the dot, and thanks to all our participants for joining this very interesting discussion and a very inspiring and motivating talk by both Sana and Vinay. It's very encouraging, and it gives us a lot of hope. At least to me, it gives a lot of hope that they have taken so much interest in protecting and preserving the lake. It's at the end of the day, you might get a court order, but to make sure that court order is implemented, to raise awareness on that court order, to raise awareness on the various committee reports that both of them mentioned. How many of us even pay attention to those kind of things? But they have taken it upon themselves to raise awareness, bring people on board, work with people, help them write these various representations, help them access the kind of information you need. So thanks to both of them again, and for giving us this very, very informative and sharing your journey, basically, both Sana and you, very interesting journeys of how you all have been working around the issue of lakes, and it's very crucial importance in today's context of water security. So thanks everyone, and please stay tuned, because next week we have another very inspiring talk by Vinod Krishnan and Dr. Ananda Kumar. And they're going to be sharing with us their work on enabling human-elephant coexistence through mobile technology. So that's another very interesting research that's happening and which is being implemented in a couple of places. So do join us next Thursday at the same time. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Anna. And before I close, my sincere thanks to Joe, Leo, Karthik, Ashwin, Varun, and everybody at CFA as well for putting this together and doing all the back-end work of social media, dissemination, everything. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.